रात एक झुंझुंझू होत आलजी झुंझुंझू होत आलजी उजाडेल उजाडेल जरा धीरे धर बये लोळण घेतील सूर्याची किरण तुझ्या पायावर
उजाडेल उजाडेल जरा धीरे धर बये लोळण घेतील सूर्याची किरण तुझ्या पायावर
तुझ्या वळणावर पहाट तुझी बघती या वाट कर मोर्याला पार मान पडू घरदार
माझे बाये
आता पावलं न चढू दग चालण्याचा ज्वर उजाडेल उजाडेल जरा धीर धर ग माझे बाये
माऊली माझे बाये माऊली माझे बाये माऊली माझे बाये माऊली माझे बाये
Today, we will look at all these beautiful stories, go through these beautiful journeys ourselves. Their kahaniyas are also your kahaniyas. I really urge all of you to support our women and really build the generation of tomorrow for a better future of our country.
After that wonderful video, to start the proceedings, I would like you to warmly welcome Jayant Rastogi, Global CEO at Magic Bus, to share his opening remarks. Please, let's have a warm round of applause.
So, a very warm welcome. Thank you for being over here. Thank you to all the audience, to our panelists, and to Charcha and Natch team for kind of allowing us or giving us the opportunity to co-host this. A little bit about Magic Bus. For those who don't know Magic Bus, we are there in 24 states. We are across the country. We work with 11 state governments, and what we do is we work with young people. Oh, sorry, I'll use this. Okay. Can you hear me? I don't think this is working. Can you hear me at the? Okay, so I think I'm loud enough. So we work with young people. We have two programs: an adolescent program and a livelihood program. We ensure that we move them from childhood to livelihood with sustainable growth and dignity. So that's what we do. So our two programs are about working with life skills with the adolescent, and seeing that they have two exit paths. They can get into higher education, or then they can get into skilling. And on a livelihood program, we actually work with school dropouts or people from third, fourth tier colleges who are not employable. We know that India has an issue of 50% of our graduates not being employable, and that's what we do. Currently, when we look at this year, thanks to all the partnerships and the support that we've got, we will be working with close to 40 lakh young adolescents this year, 52% being girls. And on the livelihood, we will be working with close to 3.5 lakh young youth, and 60% being girls. So while we work with both boys and girls, our focus has always been, focus is kind of, gender. So let me now segue into, the reason why we are here, female labor force participation. And we worked with Bain on this, and we've looked at it from a lens of Viksit Bharat 2047. So I think the results are both encouraging and sobering. So there's a white paper which Bain and company helped us to do. So when we look at, the good news first, when we look at the female labor force participation, it used to be 22% a few years back, and it's rapidly increased to 32%. I think a lot of good work from the government, from the sector, etc. The second, I think, good point is that good economics also is good politics. So we're seeing a lot of focus on empowerment of women, Political parties, we saw yesterday in Bihar, there was almost a 72% turnout for women, much more than men. And I think that is very good, you know. The third thing is that every time, you know, there's a 10% increase in female labor force participation, it bumps up the GDP 1%. So definitely very important. But the gap remains large. So when you look at international FLFPR, it's at around 49%. We are way below that. When we look at our neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, they're ahead of us. Even Saudi Arabia is ahead of us. And so the study that we did with Bain had a couple of, you know, findings that for 70% FLFPR, what we need close to 40 crore women in the workforce by 2047. And the best case scenario is that, you know, we will have close to 25 crore women by 2047. So which means that in a GDP terms, you know, instead of $30 trillion economy, which is our ambition of a Viksit Bharat by 2047, we will be at $17 trillion economy. So which means $13 trillion is through women's participation. So so I think, you know, this does not, in fact, this, you know, female labor force participation is not only good for economics, it's also good for, you know, it's good for the country. It's about inclusive growth. So, and our analysis actually shows that where does this work really start? So our analysis actually shows that, you know, if you really have to start, where do you start? You know, you start in the last five, which is, you know, where people are coming into the workforce. We just do one more thing, please. Yeah, that's it.
Give a mic, please.
So although there are learning level issues, those things are there, but I feel the problem is actually shifted to the upper primary, the adolescents. That's where the maximum dropout for girls happens, from there to higher secondary. And so that's the space that I think, you know, we need to focus on if you want girls to become a part of FLFPR. Those are the two exit paths that we spoke about. And so I'll leave it at that. And I think that, you know, so I think, you know, for Viksit Bharat, okay. So I think somebody else also wants to join me, so most welcome to. I know. So I think for Viksit Bharat, it is important that FLFPR is something that we focus on. It just can't happen without the women participating in that. So thank you so much. Let's get the session started. We have a really, really eminent panelist who will bring diverse views onto this really important subject. And we also have, you know, one of our participants from our rural entrepreneurship program, Savitri ji. So we would love to hear a story. So Preeti, I hand it over to you. If you could kind of just invite Savitri ji, and kind of, you know, get this rolling. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jayant. We'd now like to invite the most important person in the room, Ms. Savitri Devi. She's from Raghunathpura village in Jaipur. We'd like you to have it. Please, agar aap kuch shabd bol sake. Please do give her a round warm applause.
नमस्कार, मेरा नाम सावित्री देवी है। मैं राजस्थान से हूँ, गांव रघुनाथपुरा की रहने वाली हूँ। मेरे घर की स्थिति बहुत ख़राब थी, आर्थिक स्थिति। मेरे 3 बच्चे और हम 2 परिवार में हैं। तो मेरे पति बहुत ज़्यादा बीमार थे, मतलब किसी ने हमारा सपोर्ट नहीं किया। बहुत ज़्यादा हमारे घर की स्थिति ख़राब थी। तो मैंने किसी से उधार लिए थे पैसे, उन्होंने पैसे देने के लिए भी मना कर दिए। पहले से बहुत ज़्यादा कर्जा हो रखा था हमारे लिए। तो मैंने एक पड़ोस की महिला से 2 रुपये लिए कि दीदी चूल्हा जलाने के लिए माचिस नहीं है, तो 2 रुपये दे दो मुझे। तो उन्होंने पहले दिन दे दिया और दूसरे दिन कहा कि मेरे पैसे वापस दो। तो मैंने कहा अभी इनके 2 रुपये कहाँ से लाऊं, पति बीमार है, उनको छोड़ के भी नहीं जा सकती, बच्चे छोटे थे मेरे। तो मैंने खुद ने सोचा कि ऐसा क्या करूं जो कि इनके 2 रुपये भी लौटा दूं और घर पे रह के पति की सेवा भी कर सकूं। तो मैंने एक ब्लाउज सिला खुद का ही, तो उसी से मैंने मतलब सिल के मैंने देखा तो वो अच्छे से तैयार हो गया। तो मैंने पड़ोस की महिला से कहा कि आप पे है ना आपका ब्लाउज़ दे दो मेरे को, मैं सिलाई करके आपको दे दूँगी। तो मैंने वो ब्लाउज़ 5 रुपये में बेचा। 5 रुपये से मैंने ये स्टार्ट किया मेरा काम, और एक दिन धीरे धीरे मैं ये सीख गई सिलाई का काम। एक दिन हमारे यहाँ ना मैजिक बस की टीम हमारे गांव में आई, तो उन्होंने वो फॉर्म भर रहे थे, तो उन्होंने कहा कि दीदी आप भी कुछ ऐसा कुछ जानते हो क्या जो हम आपका सपोर्ट कर सके। तो मैंने कहा कि मैं एक सिलाई का काम जानती हूँ। तो उन्होंने कहा कि हमारे बरना पंचायत में एक मीटिंग होगी दीदी, आप उसमें आना। तो मैं वहाँ गई, तो वहाँ 200-250 फॉर्म भरे गए थे, तो उनमें से 40 महिलाओं को सिलेक्ट किया गया, तो उसमें से एक मेरा नाम भी था। और फिर वहाँ पे हमारी वो 3 दिन की ट्रेनिंग हुई। ट्रेनिंग के बाद हमें जो सपोर्ट मिला मैजिक बस और इंडिया फाउंडेशन का और एयू बैंक ने हमारा जो सपोर्ट किया, उसी की मदद से मैं आज यहाँ तक पहुँच गई हूँ। और मेरे मतलब मैं इतना कुछ जानती नहीं थी, तो मैंने धीरे धीरे पैसे बचाए और उनमें एक मोबाइल ख़रीदा। मोबाइल के यूट्यूब के ज़रिए और इंस्टा के ज़रिए मैंने ब्लाउज़ के नए नए डिज़ाइन बनाने शुरू किए, और गांव की महिलाओं को मैंने वो सब सिखाया कि मेरे को ये सब आता है, आप भी मेरे से सिलाई करवाओ। तो उसी मदद से मैं आज यहाँ तक पहुँच पाई हूँ। जो 5 रुपये से मैंने स्टार्ट किया था, आज मैं 20,000 रुपये तक कमा पाती हूँ। और मैं गांव की महिलाओं को यही कहना चाहती हूँ कि जैसे मैंने संघर्ष से लड़के आज मैं यहाँ तक पहुँची हूँ, हर महिला मेरी तरह ही बने, हर महिला एक सावित्री देवी बने। धन्यवाद। मैं एयू बैंक और मैजिक बस का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देना चाहती हूँ। बहुत सपोर्ट किया है उन्होंने मेरा, और मैं यहाँ तक पहुँच पाई हूँ। मेरा पति मेरा बहुत सपोर्ट करते हैं, मैं सिलाई करती हूँ तो वो आयोग करते हैं, तो उनका बहुत सपोर्ट रहता है, तो मैं यहाँ तक पहुँच पाई हूँ। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद Savitri ji. Now please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists for the panel discussion. First, I'd like to welcome Maharshi Vaishnav, CEO of Motilal Oswal Foundation. Manju Dhasmana, Senior Director CSR, Microsoft Philanthropies India. Neeta Agarwal, Associate Director Programs, Asia at Co-Impact. Riya Mazumdar Singhal, Founder at EcoWare and Partnerships Lead at the Udayati Foundation. The session will be moderated by Aarti Mohan, Co-Founder and Partner at Sattva Consulting. Thank you, everyone.
Hello? All right. I think Savitri ji reminded us again of the fact that, you know, however many women entrepreneurs we might have seen, you know, lived through with their journeys, met them. I feel like I'm yet to meet a woman entrepreneur who's waiting to be empowered. So when we say women's economic empowerment, I don't think it's empowerment, it's really just providing them good solutions, because they're doing a lot with very little that they've been given. So, thanks Jayant for highlighting how then this is really, you know, something that we need to tackle at scale as well. So even if we grow at the current rates of women's current labor force participation, the numbers are stark. We're still going to have 145 million women that will graduate from education and will not be part of the workforce. And where are the jobs for them? What is the entrepreneurship that can be enabled for them is still a question out there. And even the ones that are in the workforce, how can they be retained? That is also an equally important question. And like Jayant rightly highlighted, our biggest cliff drop starts at the secondary education level, and you know where women, girls are routinely passed over in you know towards higher education or taking their education forward for starting their economic you know work already, or doing unpaid care work, and we have the highest unpaid care work done by women in the global south, and that the World Economic Forum highlights. And as much as the World Economic Forum highlights gains in terms of the more number of women joining the workforce, more number of women being able to take forward their entrepreneurship, it also highlights that the economic outcomes and the social outcomes for the women from this work and this entrepreneurship is actually going lower. So we have a twin problem to tackle, and my eminent panelist is probably going to be a debate because judging by what we were just speaking outside, it's going to be super interesting. They have a whole lot of insights to bring to us. So without further ado, let me go into the panel itself, and I'm going to start with you, Neeta. So when we think of the women's labor force participation at scale, I think foundationally we need to figure out what is the system that we are working to change, improve, enable better, and what does systems change look like? Because what's got us this far is clearly not going to get us further. And Compact has been working on really, enlivening the idea of systems change. So over to you to tell us more about what is systems change in the context of women's economic participation.
Thanks, Aarti. Thanks, Magic Bus team and Charcha team for having me here. I think from co-impact lens, when we talk about female participation in labor force or women economic empowerment, there are individual change and individual stories, I think. But what is also very central for us is how does systems change to make women's work viable, visible, and valuable. I think that's critical because it's an enabler to everything. I think we do have a strong view that female labor force participation is not just about participation. There's a structural, it's a structural barrier in many ways. If we look at, the gender report, the global gender report, India is somewhere around 126th or 127th out of 146 countries. And there's been economic growth in India, right?
And so for us, one of our North Star goals is to increase that 18% piece. When we look at FLFPR, I think from corporate accountability, we have to shift mindset. Inclusion is not CSR. It needs to be sort of embedded in decision making. And we have to look at it as not cost to company, but talent retention. And this is something that we talked about previously as well. And I think it's fairly evident that when we invest in girls' agency, you back it with enablers that sort of provide an enabling environment, for the lack of a better word, but you invest in infrastructure, accountability, safe transport, logistics, accommodation. That aspiration for that girl then turns into participation, right? And that's where the shift lies. So I think those are the few things that I would suggest.
Thank you for pointing out how we need to look at growing the aspirations of girls when they are in school in order to move forward. Manju, coming to you, we're in a country that's taken one of the biggest bets on technology, democratizing access to better lives and livelihoods for every citizen. But yet, the dichotomy is the gender-digital divide is fairly strong, and we are not able to leverage the gains from the DPI-DPG or technology ecosystems to serve women. On the other hand, technology could be a very significant enabler if it is able to look at ensuring safety, continuity, access to skills and education for women to further their journeys. How do you see this dichotomy and how do you see this opportunity being leveraged?
I think I firstly have to thank Magic Bus and Charcha to invite me here. Not because I have very much meaningful contribution to make, but because it gave me a very thoughtful pause. I mean, as I look at my panelists and as I look at all of you, I'm probably one of the eldest in the rooms. And it was 1993 that we started talking about female labor force participation. I used to work in Banda Karvi, and we used to work with rural women. And it worries me if 30 years down the line, we're still talking about it, which means that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. So give me a thoughtful pause to look at even my own programs and say, are we really addressing it at a systemic level, or are we still doing it at discrete program level? So that's one point. I want to be upfront and say, I don't think as Microsoft, we've looked at it at a systemic level, right? And this pause is great. I really hope to go back and talk to my council and say, if this is an important area, let's look at it systemically. I think the second thing I would say is that even though I'm concerned, and why am I concerned? I know that we're talking about AI will democratize access to opportunity for everyone, right? Because AI is like a general technology, it's like electricity, everybody has to interface with it. There is data that's worrying, right? What we're hearing is, even when you look at employers and women in formal economy, for every one person who might, for every one male who might lose a job, what we're seeing is 1.8 women will lose their job. Even though nobody says it, we're hearing from employers that if they have to upskill people, they would rather invest in men than in women upskilling, right? So we're clearly seeing some concerning areas. So however, I am going to say this, that I have a very positive, optimistic attitude as I sit here. Even though I'm concerned, I see things on the ground, right? And I do see things shifting. Are they shifting at a systemic level is a question that we have to ask, but I do see areas where technology and innovation can help, Aarti. I think one of the, and largely this work has been driven by nonprofits, so kudos to all of you who've kind of kept us accountable, honest, and really pushed that agenda. To give you an example, I was in a meeting that Development Alternative had organized just a week back on entrepreneurship, and somebody said a very important point, that women's agency is very, very important, and it's for women to determine what they mean by inclusive entrepreneurship, or what do they mean by being an entrepreneur, right? And I think that was very good for me to hear, because largely what I hear in discussions is a very male gaze, right? We have a very patriarchal construct to what it means to be part of labor force participation, and how do we shift that? Now, coming back to how technology can really enable, where I've seen examples, and maybe I'll provide some of those examples here. One of the things, and I think Jayant referred to that, is this leaky pipeline that we talk about, right? Which is the fact that we have like almost 100% enrollment at primary level, but not at secondary level. We're not able to take them from 8th, 9th, 10th. And clearly in our work, as well as the work of some of our partners that are here about like Educate Girls, we're seeing technology being able to help to bring the girls back into workforce, because before that, the construct was, if you've left school, that's it, you're lost, right? You either get married or you're maybe doing something, a small enterprise. So we are seeing examples of chatbots that are helping women, creating micro-credentials so that, and connected to jobs. So we are clearly seeing that. I think the other area that technology can help, and is helping, we are doing quite a bit of that in that space as Microsoft, is what we call meaningful connectivity, right? We talk about access to devices, access to internet, but what does it really mean for a woman? Is that, and to a woman, like less than 50% of rural women own a device, right? So how do you create spaces where they get independent access to digital devices, to digital world, but in a way that matters to them? And what I mean by that is, how are we really using these centers that we are creating, or connectivity centers we are creating, to give them access to their own aspirations, right? Whether that is starting an enterprise of their own, or that is about jobs that they are looking for. The other area, I think, quickly, I think where we're seeing technology helping quite a bit is in the space of digital skilling. Early on, I think there's a lot of even partners who are doing a lot of work around STEM. And we have noticed a difference when girls are introduced early on to technology. We do find that a lot of them actually, I don't know whether there's a study that's been done, but a lot of them continue through schools. So how do we create more programs like this, which are doing school to work transition? I think I saw Manu here. So if you look at Karya's work, I encourage you to look at Karya's work to use how a digital platform and platform economy that they're using to bring data annotation, that kind of AI-led work, even to rural women in UP, Karnataka, Andhra, right? Those are examples, again, of technology innovation helping. There are many more. However, I think what I'll end up, Aarti was saying, is that examples exist. Pilots exist. I think we have a lot to learn from some of our neighboring countries, but also from Africa, where we're seeing a lot around digital financial inclusion. But how do you build that into a systemic approach? And I'm really looking forward to people helping us think through how we build that all together in this entire one approach instead of discrete segments.
Thanks so much for highlighting where all technology is concretely helping women join the workforce, grow their livelihoods, and so on. And I think segueing from the system and various components of the system that Neeta pointed out, to gender norms that we need to work upon, to the technology enablers that we need to unlock. Marshi, I'd love to come to you. At least, I mean, if we can double that number to 400 million, but what are they going to do? And we know that at least in the rural contexts, there is this whole 15.7 million women entrepreneurs in India. It's a very conservative number. Most of them are informal. And if you say ease of doing business in India is X, like 1/3 X is ease of doing business for women in India, right? So it's true that the entrepreneurs therefore are nano, micro. So what do you make of the opportunity to transform rural livelihoods and entrepreneurship for women that are part of rural India?
Okay, great. So first, thanks Jayant. Thanks for having me on this panel. वैसे यहाँ तो, if I were to start with on a cheeky note, यहाँ काफी female participation है. 80% है यहाँ पर तो. So Jayant, मुझे लग रहा है आपने मुझे diversity के लिए ही इस panel पे बिठाया है. Now I realize. But no, मैं यहाँ पर, while I represent a philanthropy that I have very recently joined, I'm here largely because of my experience with Educate Girls. I used to be a part of Educate Girls for the last decade and a half. तो FLFPR की बात करें तो it's an interesting statistic. The country with the highest FLFPR are either the richest or the poorest. So I was doing some reading over the weekend, and apparently Madagascar has the highest FLFPR in this world. You know, some obscene 88-89%. Then there is Solomon Island, Tanzania, Nigeria. And then, I mean, those are tiny countries, no point benchmarking us against them. So I decided to read up on China. China में बहुत interesting trend था, जो शायद हमारे यहाँ पर भी हम देखेंगे. जब Deng के reforms आए, when they decided to switch gears from an agrarian to a manufacturing economy, so they were at about 20, 25, 30% female participation. And manufacturing में, खैर उनकी government system अलग है, उनका तरीका अलग था, but they shot from about 30% to 75% in a decade. But that was while they were doing slightly lower end manufacturing. Now as the countries become much, much more affluent, that's one. Second, they have switched gears to very high-end manufacturing. Their FLFPR has fallen by 15% in 5 years. 75 से अब it's now 59%. And that's kind of distressing them a little bit. So शायद हम भी उसी trend पे है जहाँ पर हम फिलहाल we are trying to be the China +1 manufacturing, rural India को कैसे revive किया जाए, ये सारी conundrum में हम फंसे हुए हैं, and therefore, we may in some shape or form follow that trend, albeit with a different style of government. But more importantly, अब मुझे 15 साल सरकार के साथ negotiate करने की आदत है, so I have a lot of government data, all right, और सरकार सिर्फ government का data मान्य रखते हैं, आप कोई और private sector का data लाएंगे तो वो मानेंगे नहीं. So we are already the world's largest enterprise engine. We have about 91 lakh self-help groups. And we have almost 11 crore members. So I don't think mobility and mobilization per se is such, mobility, I don't mean from rural to urban mobility. Mobilization per se isn't the challenge. I don't think that is the frontier that we must be so worried about. What's required now is how do we bring in access to finance and then market linkages. Savitri ji was fortunate to have a neighbor who was willing to lend her money, a family that was very supportive. She's suggested her husband, etc. But that's an outlier example. Not all women have that, that luxury, for the lack of a better word. So therefore, how do we bring in access to capital and linkages to finance. So the next frontier isn't forming groups, as I said, it's financing firms and linking them to markets. And rural India hai to unfortunately, or fortunately, there is dairy, there is food processing, there is textile, handloom, ecotourism, perhaps a little bit of retail, rural logistics, etc. And these are more than ample opportunities that we could potentially generate over time. ये एक quick fix नहीं होने वाला है, क्योंकि इसका कारण ये है कि credit is still very much collateral first, largely urban, paperwork heavy. मैं पढ़ रहा था OECN के AI backed linkages के बावजूद on an average एक rural SHG को, rural micro entrepreneur को 45 से 60 दिन का समय लगता है to gain access to even the smallest category of financing. अब मुझे तो random apps 10 लाख 20 लाख के loans ऐसे ही provide करने को तैयार है. And मेरी credit worthiness, how does an app know about my credit worthiness, right? So ऐसा क्यों कि अगर फीमेल है या SHG है या राजस्थान के किसी गांव में है या बिहार के किसी गांव में है तो उन्हें 60 दिन क्यों रुकना पड़े? एक SHG की क्रेडिट वर्दीनेस भी उतनी ही होनी चाहिए जितनी एक अर्बन मेल की होती है, राइट? बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली that's where the paradox kind of comes in. The other paradox is a majority of women entrepreneurs in rural India are nano and micro with over 80% under 5 lakh turnover. ये मैं RBI का डेटा कोट कर रहा हूँ. So ये एक reality है. On the other side, NRLM के जो 10 crore SHGs हैं, they have a collectivized asset base of 3 lakh crores. Again, it's about marrying the two. It's about bringing in systems that look at both the sides. So therefore, I feel हम जितना financing आसान करते हैं, जितना बाद post that market linkage आसान करते हैं, things become that much easier. And there are schemes, so सावित्री जी आपको शायद पता ही होगा, आप मुझसे बेहतर कह पाएंगे, but राजीविका जो program है राजस्थान में, right? Again, I'm not so sure if you've kind of benefited from it, but I've had, during my time at Educate Girls, the girls whom we used to graduate post the 10th and the 12th grade, जो higher education pathway नहीं follow करते थे, वो राजीविका का फायदा ले पाते थे. But again, it's not organic. It's largely survival of the fittest. जिन्हें ये इसके बारे में मालूम है, जो अपना paperwork संभाल पाते हैं, जिनके पास एक supportive ecosystem है, वो manage कर लेते हैं. जिनके पास ये सारी चीजें नहीं हैं, they are unfortunately relegated to a different story. So again, just to kind of reiterate, we have inherent strengths, 10 crore plus 11 crores women, part of active SHGs, collectivized asset base of 3 lakh crores. अब उन्हें सिर्फ financing और linkages से जोड़ने की ज़रूरत है. और इसमें OECN है, जो एक काफ़ी active role play कर सकता है.
Taking away what you said about diversifying local economies and tapping into the entrepreneurship there in a bunch of these sectors, but also considering the transitions that are happening. Because every time mechanization or improvement in technology process come in, women get elbowed out there again, right? Like, and it's even more excluding. So thanks for bringing up the two parts of that perspective, and also the fact that we have the largest engine that we can tap into. On the job side, I mean, it looks like rural entrepreneurship, urban jobs, and that's where the manufacturing hubs and so on, maximum up to tier 2, tier 3, right? So Ria, coming to you, and you run at an initiative at Udaiti Foundation, close the gender gap by your collating industry data. So what can you tell us about where the jobs are that women can tap into if we have to solve that part of the problem? And how can that further help decision-making in the sector?
Thank you. I think that's really pertinent to us at Udaiti because we use gender data and we work with stakeholders across government, state, central, as well as our private sector enterprises to basically say, this is what the landscape is. You know, these are the sort of interventions we suggest. We pilot these solutions, test them, and then obviously that leads to sort of recommendations, right, at a industry and at a national level. And two of our flagship programs. One is the We Index, which was launched in the state of UP and is now embedded into the CM's control dashboard. And there's one number here of impact that I'm really proud of, because I think so we work across the idea is to improve, like I said, access to quality jobs, work on strengthen enablers like housing, mobility, childcare. So I think in the state of UP, there were about 300 bus drivers across the state. And this We Index and the gender disaggregated data allowed now for this number to grow 10x. So because of knowing that this has been an issue, this is the data, the number of bus conductors in UP are now, bus conductors in UP are now 3,000. So that's the power of data. A small example right there. We've got 2 PMUs set up in the Ministry of Women and Child Development, as well as MOLE.
There's a strong gender lens. But what happens internally within the organization, right? Like inside the sector, inside your own organization, what does gender lens look like? Are we representative enough? Are we holding our organizational practices? And I think that's where philanthropy can help in also lifting the game and increasing the standards. So internal lens for the organization, for the nonprofits to say, what does our own gender lens ratio look like? How are we supporting women in leadership, right? Do we have a pathway? Do we have second line of leadership, a grooming line of leadership as well, which is representative? So that's one. The other I feel is where philanthropies can play a role is on the why of it and not on the how. So if we stay at the level of why this is needed, but trust the partners to work on the how. And therefore philanthropy, when they get into the how, it becomes more directive, it becomes more operational. So if philanthropy stays at a level of why this is needed, and leave the autonomy of the how and where and which to the partners, I think that's when a thriving ecosystem can exist. What we've also found in our work is you need multiple players and collectives to come together. And in some of our initiatives, what we are seeing is when partners drive those collectives, bringing non-traditional partners together, and we call it in winning coalitions, but I think that's what you need for systemic transformation to happen. You can't have all organizations working on one side of the spectrum. You need multiple entry points. So I think if philanthropy can encourage collaboration, not by creating competing structures, but by creating structures that are enabling and foster collaboration, I think that would be great.
Thank you for the winning coalitions. I think it rung a bell there, so that's clearly what we have to move towards. Manju, what does winning coalitions look like when even from a technology industry point of view, what are some of the green shoots you're seeing? And from your point of view also, where can capital help in bringing this together at scale?
No, I think I'm going to put my CSR hat on, and people often refer to me as a philanthropies head, but I'm like a CSR lead, and there is a difference between philanthropies and CSR. One pitch I would make right now is, and I think this is also to you, Aarti, like it's a pitch to you, is that when I look at FLFPR, right, I think before this session, I hadn't thought about it at all, right? So I don't know how do we bring a coalition together when at least within CSR and companies, I haven't heard this conversation. And I'm in a lot of these panels and discussions, right? So I think to steal Neeta's words, Aarti, I think how do we make FLFPR itself visible, viable, and valuable? Like when you do a CSR report, Aarti, do you see that there? So why is FLFPR not there if it is a priority? So can we at least start by making it a priority? And I really, really look at all my peers across CSR and companies. I think they're at the right place. What we need to do is maybe, all the other panelists here can, help with some of this is elevate the discussion. So the discussion is all about women empowerment. The discussion is all about how do you get women to participate in tech, but how do we move that into a system level? So there's some good work happening, but how does it thread together? So is it like a rolling moss? So we'll eventually, if we keep doing small initiative, big initiative, maybe ultimately we'll end up impacting FLFPR. But can we together take it up? I would say that if I had to take one clarion call back from here, it will be how do we make it more visible and get people's attention, especially in CSR and industries on it. I haven't heard that.
Very critical action item on us, right, at Satwa, that this is what we are trying to bring together as well across rooms where industry, entrepreneurship, all of that come together. And if you look at the CSR data, the livelihood is the one that's grown by 8 to 10x in the last 3 years in terms of investment. It's just a pity that we don't have the women data behind it, but I'm sure we'll have that soon. But capital is also financing, and Marshi, as you rightly pointed out, we have 3 lakh crore assets among the SHGs. So what is the role of blended finance in complementing philanthropy and CSR and bringing this together at scale?
I'll answer that question, but before that, ये थोड़ा self-serving लग रहा है ना ये dialogue, ये पूरा जो हम बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि हमें विकसित बनना है in 2 decades, क्योंकि हमें 30 trillion का economy बनना है, इसलिए अब female labor force participation बढ़ाना ही होगा. We don't have a choice. As we were discussing, that thought kept recurring in my mind कि ये हम शायद इसको एक self-serving mission बना रहे हैं. But what you described, make it more visible, I think शायद वो अगर हम करें and without bringing in the economy and the other indicators, I think that would work. Blended finance में मेरा experience educate girls का ये था, हमने एक development impact bond किया था राजस्थान के भीलवाड़ा में, जहाँ पर सबसे जो marginalized बच्चियाँ जो स्कूल नहीं जाती हैं उनको स्कूल से जोड़ना है regardless of their age and stage. उनको स्कूल से जोड़ना है and then we have to get them up to grade appropriate learning level. Modified असर पे हम उनका evaluation करते थे 8वीं कक्षा तक. ये हमारा मॉडल था जिसमें UBS Optimus इन्वेस्टर था, चिल्ड्रंस इन्वेस्टमेंट फंड फाउंडेशन जो सिफ है वो अंडरराइटर था, एंड एग्जीक्यूशन में एजुकेट गर्ल्स था. हम लेवरेज कर रहे थे गवर्नमेंट ऑफ राजस्थान के स्कूल के इन्वेस्टमेंट्स. दैट वाज एसेंशियली द मॉडल. अगेन was successful. Our investor made 14% IRR over a 3-year period. We got a hefty bonus. It was successful. सब बढ़िया था. तो उससे अगर मैं कुछ सीखता हूँ, उससे अगर मैं कुछ डिराइव करता हूँ, तो the same model could easily get replicated at this end. A philanthropy like ours perhaps could step in and underwrite a fund which links girls and women right from school to either, and I wouldn't actually want to call it employment, largely because rural India में skilling, internship and employment के deserts हैं. ये जो हम FLFPR की बात करते हैं वो unfortunately it gets tagged to tier 1, tier 2, at best tier 3 cities. उसके बाद तो फिर informal nano micro entrepreneurship पे ही बात आ जाती है. Because these rural towns and villages are deserts in themselves, so therefore any economic activity per se, anything that raises the household income per se, I think अगर उससे भी जोड़ा जाए, I think that's a great proxy indicator. So school के higher grades से लेके economic activity में participation करना, एक philanthropy उसे underwrite करे, and ideally सरकार should be stepping in as an investor, but सरकार में वो शायद difficult हो सकता है. So therefore a financial institution could step in as an investor. This is exactly what we did. UBS was the investor, a philanthropy SIF was the underwriter, we were the service provider. तो यही blended finance का model अगर हम यहाँ try करें इस space में जहाँ पर women को हम link करें to an economic activity, I think it's analogous. ये आसानी से हो सकता है.
We've also run out of time, but just to, many very interesting insights that have come out in today's panel. We said, how do we grow formal jobs from 18 to 30%? How do we diversify and leverage the power force of rural entrepreneurship that we have? How do you look at winning coalitions in terms of philanthropy playing the role of why rather than what and how, which can be figured out? How do we make it visible and viable? and a conversation that can become front and center in various different rooms across stakeholders, and how do we look at different types of financing and underwriting that we can actually use to drive more economic activity, and how do we use data underlying to all of this so we're making the right decisions at the right time in the right place. So, ये सब चर्चा अच्छा है, but कल से क्या करना है? For that, I'd like to invite Jayant back on stage because he had a master plan behind all of this, and we have a full room here of interested people that are, I'm sure, allies as we go through in this journey. So, Jayant, over to you.
So thank you. I think really insightful. I just want to take a minute on what Manju said. It's very close to my heart also. So Manju was talking about these verbal chatbots, where, you know, a girl in a rural place has access to, you know, the best of information, learning, etc. So I know I'm actually, you know, pivoting to something else, but I just want to tell you that we've created one ourselves in-house, right? So which is on spoken English and career counseling. So, but fantastic insights, systemic change is what you spoke about. You spoke about data as a bedrock for, you know, any evidence designing. And I think, you know, very insightful that, you know, for large economies, very large and very poor, you know, that was quite revealing, and I didn't know that. So thank you so much. But I think, you know, like the panelists have said that, you know, this cannot happen with, you know, one organization or one person kind of, you know, putting this together. We need collective effort. This is a huge task, and this is one of the, you know, one of the key ingredients for India to move ahead. And I'm not going to use the word Viksit because Maharishi will again, you know, hang me wife for Viksit Bharat. So I'm going to say that, you know, this is for inclusive growth. It helps Viksit Bharat, by the way, but this is something which is definitely required. So what we want to do at Magic Bus is we wanted to build a collective. We're working with Satwa on this, and we wanted to put a collective together where, you know, like-minded organizations who feel that this is something that they, you know, align with, or they feel that they can work with, policy, think tank, government, advocacy, funders, CSR institutional. We would love for you to come together and put this together. We'll be sharing more details as we move ahead. We've ourselves not figured out, I won't say that we have all the answers. We're still trying to figure that out, but very happy to work with anybody who's able to, you know, support us on this. Really key and important initiative. And I think that this is one of the most important things that the country requires today, you know. There's no doubt. See, if you talk about India's problems, you know, the biggest problems are around, you know, I would say education, livelihood and skilling. The second is around, you know, our agricultural productivity rates. Then you have housing. So I think, you know, and climate, and I think this is one of the biggest areas that, you know, which I think cuts across. So would love to hear from people who are interested in this, and we'll be kind of, you know, reaching out to people. We'll be putting things out there. So if you're interested, please do write to us. So Aarti, with your permission, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and taking Manju's cue, hope we make it visible enough so that by Charcha next year,
yeah, visible and
I'm
viable.
creating an all-male panel taking you up on FLFPR. We've created enough champions, enough action to do that. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you.